am. And the answers are interesting. And there are many reasons why these answers are interesting. They answered and said John the Baptist, some say Elias, and others one of the prophets. Now, all three answers are of dead people. And you should pay attention to that. John is dead. By now he's beheaded. Elias, of course, translated, but considered dead. All the prophets before him are gone. All three answers are about dead people. And here's where it gets interesting, because I did some further study and I knew or know that the Jews believed in reincarnation. Some still do. They believe you die and you come back. And they also believe that sometimes you come back because you haven't finished the work that you were to accomplish. And so they say people, they die and they come back to finish the work. Now, I'm not espousing to it. I'm simply saying they believed in reincarnation. It's apparent. Look at it again. And they answered. They said, you're John the Baptist. They said, you're Elias. They said, you're one of the prophets. Didn't name that one live man. So that right there speaks to the prevailing idea of reincarnation, which we know they believed in. They also believed in purgatory to a degree too. But I won't go in there. Don't lose your faith here. But this is the background. When you study, you learn stuff. And so this is what they believed in. But then he asked the question, well, let me stop right there. Why would they think that? Because obviously the excellent spirit that he walked in, the power that he walked in, the way he taught, the way he ministered was reminiscent on the surface, but then that led them to believe that you're just a reincarnation of the former. And so he says, but who do you say? Because you've been with me. You know I'm not one of those. Who do you say? And of course, we know Peter answers, says, thou art the Christ. Now, thou art the Christ is important because thou art the Christ refers to the Messiah. The Mashiach is what they say in the Hebrew. The one they believe to come. The one who's going to come according to the ancient Jewish thinking. Until today, they still believe the Messiah has not come. They believe that Jesus is not the Messiah because he didn't do what they expect the Messiah to do. They expect the Messiah to restore Israel to greatness again. They expect, in this case, and today, they now expect the Messiah to come back and rebuild the temple that has been torn down by Titus in AD 74. And so none of these things took place. Of course, the temple was still standing when Jesus left. So, that's an addition to the whole idea of the temple, but we won't get into that right now. But the reality is they are waiting on the Messiah. So when they say thou art the Christ, and they say you're Jesus, you're Christ, the anointed one, the Messiah, as the priest is anointed, the Messiah is the anointed one. And so you're the one we're waiting on. Remember, 400 years of silence has taken place, and they have not yet heard a word from the Lord. And then comes Jesus. So at this point in biblical history, Jesus is coming to a people that had not heard from God, because God said that he would shut up the heavens and wouldn't speak to them. And we call that the 400 years of silence. So he's born on the other side of the 400 years of silence. And of course, Matthew introduces that by giving genealogy. And so they're looking for this Messiah to come. They're looking for him to come. And of course, the things that Jesus has done, of course, the miracle he just performed, just puts people in the mind of some man with the capacity to do supernatural things. I'll digress and say this, that when I did some earlier studies with the current expectation of the Messiah, the current Jews believe that he's not going to die for sins. They think that the death of Jesus being heralded by us is a joke, that he's not going to have any special powers. They believe that, but that he is going to build a temple. They believe that they are building a temporary temple, and he's going to build the permanent one. So they're not going to make it so. And this is their thinking. And of course, they think that our Jesus is a joke, that nobody dies for people, and that there is no supernatural power that the Messiah is going to have. I find that interesting, but that's what they teach if you do background study in the Jewish religion of current. And so Peter says, no, you're that one. You're that anointed. There's something about you. And then, of course, we know in Matthew's account, he told Peter, we know that flesh and blood didn't reveal it to you, because a former brother are based on flesh and blood, but God gave it to you. And he told them they should tell no man. So we have here in the 22nd verse, he can't tell anyone, around verse number 27, 26 rather. He says, to him, go to your house, saying, neither go into the town nor tell it to anyone in the town. Go home, and they'll know. He didn't say he couldn't tell your home folk. He said, but don't tell anyone. In verse number 30, he says the same thing to Peter and the disciples. I'm the Messiah. Just pause for a moment and recognize what would it have been like if they advanced that narrative that he was the Messiah. And then think about this just for a minute. He was the Messiah. Just think that he didn't tell them to share that news. And they immediately, upon confirmation, went out and began to share the Messiah is here. The Messiah is here. Well, it would have been a problem for several reasons. Now, you may not know this, but if you read the book of Acts, when they had threatened the disciples with Gamaliel in the Sanhedrin court, Gamaliel says something quite interesting. He lets them know, in no uncertain terms, if this work is of God, you can't fight against it. And if it's not of God, it will come to nothing. And he reminded the brethren how of days going back, there was another man who called himself the Messiah, and he led away many disciples to their destruction. So they weren't new to this idea. It was something that happened. And so they understood that, many men have come. When Jesus says in Mark 24 that they say in the desert, I am the Christ, lo, there is Christ, believe them not, don't go there. He wasn't telling them something that had never happened before, because it had already happened. But he was just reminding them of continuation of the same. Now, the second reason why this is important that you should tell no man, because in the minds of the Jew, there was not to be a crucifixion of the Messiah. He was to come, and he was to stand on the mountain, and it claved in two, and all the stuff they say prophetically was to take place was to take place. So just imagine the disciples weren't privy to the rest of the mission of which Jesus tells them in verse 31. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected of the elders, of chief priests and scribes, and be killed. And of course, he would rise and raise up in 3 days. Now, Peter's reaction is very telling of why it was important they couldn't tell anybody. Because in verse 32, he spake this saying openly, and Peter took him and began to rebuke him. But when he had turned about, he looked on his disciples. He rebuked Peter, saying, get thee hence, or behind me, Satan. Okay. So Peter's response is exactly case in point of why they couldn't tell anyone, because no one was going to believe that the Messiah can be killed. And that would have affected the ministry going forward had the advanced narrative been he's the Messiah and then he's killed. Because you do know that even though he got it from the dead, only a few people saw him alive. And according to Matthews, I believe it is also, a lie was perpetrated and soldiers were paid by the priest to say that when they fell asleep, the disciples came and stole the body. And the scripture says, and this thing is commonly reported unto this day. Of course, that was in their day, but it is probably still reported among their group as well. He never got up. The disciples, came and stole him. That's the word they have from centuries. So the impact on the Christian ministry would have been immense. The ability to convert in the day of Pentecost would have been problematic, because the advanced word would have been the disciples would have so advanced the narrative of him being the Messiah, to many would have come in unto him. Around the cross would have been more than just a few that were there, because they were all anticipating the Messiah, and he's gotten killed. It would have ever damaged the ability to minister to the 3,000 on the day of Pentecost, and then the 5,000 some days later, and then beyond. So that was the reason, perhaps, why he had to dumb down his reputation. So my question is, who am I? Who am I? Do I consist of the things I do or the reason I came? This is what Jesus is saying to us, that we need to recognize you exist not by the things you do, but by the reason you do them. And the believer needs to understand that. We need to understand that, we say, we say it this way. Your gift will make room for you and bring you before great men. All of that resonates with the things I do, not the reason I came. So when I get in front of those great men, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to kowtow or speak truth to power? So oftentimes in the Christian world, I find that we're so stuck on the things we do and not the reason we am or are. I use that deliberately. And Jesus wasn't interested in them advancing the fact that he spit in a man's eye and the man could now see, or that he stopped the funeral processional and the man got up off the bier, or that he went up into the upper room and Tabitha, he said, "Kumai," and the damsel got up. He's not interested in the advancement of those things because that's not why he's here. Those are the consequences. Those are the realities of being a power broker. But the real essence of who he was is found in John. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. So it is not the greatness of the deed. It's not the greatness of the act. And when we do great things in God, then we become, pursuers of a career of being great about our gifting and not what the gift is supposed to be doing. And so when the gift is supposed to be doing something, in this case, Peter, it makes you vulnerable. You can die. You can be destroyed because you're here for that reason. Ironically, so you should die because you're the Christ and you're supposed to die for our sins. So ironically, Peter's rebuking Jesus for the thing that was needed to continue his salvation. And so that can find something in that discussion. Sometimes we don't understand it and we get lost into the things that are on the surface, as we say, superficial, and not into the deep-rooted reason of our existence. And so then the gift overshadows the purpose of our existence. And so Jesus couldn't allow that to happen. So he said, keep quiet. Don't build up my reputation. Now we know why he does this. Don't speak it here. Don't go in on that. Conversely, in our day and time, we take out a page on social media and we advance our causes and our thoughts and our thinking and our whatevers. And we live in the aura of the deed and not the purpose of the deed. And so Jesus lives in the aura of the purpose of the deed, not the deed itself. So therefore, you don't need to make a special space for me. You don't need to. But also what this does is it makes greatness vulnerable. And I believe that we feel when we become great in God, we no longer are supposed to be vulnerable. I dare coin a phrase and say the greater you are, the more vulnerable you become. It was, I think, Farrakhan that said, great men have great flaws. Not an excuse for sin, but you become more vulnerable to the attack, the insistent attack, the constant attack. Great women, great people. The greater you are in the expression of the things of God, the more appetizing you become for the adversary. But you must be careful to not allow the who you are to replace the what you are and the reason you are and the purpose you are. And that also covers the idea of then accepting certain things in your life and not seeing them as adverse to the essence of who you are. I'll put it in today's term. Because, you're seen in your group as an orator or a great singer or one who has deep prophetic capacity or dreams big. And therefore, everything about you, you live right, you walk right. The testimony of you is that you have a clean life. Therefore, when things happen to us, we grow a little embarrassed, never realizing that those things are happening because of the reason of your existence. We're focused on the who I am and this can't happen to me. I once had a conversation with a brother, and I'll tell you this story. The brother came to me, and I want you to hear me through all the way through. He said to me, when I was married early before I got into the Lord, he said, I violated my wedding vows. He said, my wife doesn't know. I'm clean now. I'm not doing it. I'm good. But I really feel I need to share that. He said, what do you say? And I said, I don't think you should. Now, this is when my life was clean. I wasn't funny and nothing like that. I was good. Walking right. I said, I don't think you should. And I didn't know why I said it then. But years later, I get it now. I'll tell you why I get it. Because from that point going forward, he put himself in a place where he always felt guilty. And then he felt guilty about this in his family, and he felt guilty about that in his family, and he felt guilty about this. And then the brother came to me and said, I can't minister because family isn't right. How could I minister if family isn't right? And the Lord showed me that's why I told him not to say that. Because the adversary used that against him. And to this very moment that I speak, he is dislocated from his function. Because he was into the who I am and not the what and why I am. And he thought it right. And he meant well. But based on what I know now, and we are talking about 33 years later, still stuck. Now, I'm not to say, and I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't be clean in your ways. I'm making an example and a point of what I understand now. And I felt a little bad about saying that because, but that's what came out of my mouth. And that was the advice I gave him. You weren't even saved. You weren't living right. And whatever. But that was what I was led to tell him. Now, 33 years later, I get it. Once that happened, once he got stuck in it, then it snowballed into now I can't minister because I can't even save my own family. Adversary beat him with it. And to this day, he's winning out. Gotta be careful. My point of this particular discussion is to know the what and forget about the who. Because the what is going to put you in strange places. We have prophets marrying prostitutes because of the what. Okay? We have conquerors of land saving prostitutes and then marrying them. And now she's in the lineage of Jesus Christ because of the what. If you get stuck on the who, the prophet doesn't marry the prostitute. The prostitute does not get saved in Jericho. If you get stuck in the who, things happen. Because at the end of the day, we are made for God's pleasure. And he uses us the way he desires. We are clay. And we cannot dignify the what based on who we think we are, having arrived. No. Such a tricky lesson. But it is so clear to me in the scriptures that Jesus wanted them to understand that about him. Now look at what he says and look at the answers. Those who answered were into the surface of what he looked like. They weren't basing their answer on the what, they were basing it on the who. Well, you are John. Now how could they think he's John? But they did, because they were looking at the actions of John, Elias, or some of the prophets. Jesus turns to Peter, and Peter gives the what? You're the Christ. Interpretation. You're the sacrifice. You're the one that God gave. What you're here for is important, not what you're doing till you get there. So the healing is of no consequence particularly. It's just an estimate. But your real purpose comes through when you execute the reason you're here for. And that's what I want to share with you. Doesn't matter where your life is, single, divorced, marriage falling apart, things ain't going the way you envisioned they were to go, quite probably because you were basing it on the surface of what people see. They see a John, they see an Elias. But who are you? What's your purpose, that is? Why are you? The why are you is going to cancel all expectations of men. And it should. The moment you let men estimate you, then you've lost the what value, what you're here for. As you are proving these three questions I raised yesterday, sins, weights, and mistakes, you will peel back the layers of all these other incidental things and begin to recognize, why am I here? Not who am I while I'm here, but why am I here? As I think Mother Faith shared once when she went to Africa and talked about the villagers who'd gather around a pregnant woman who was with child, and they would dance and sing, and then they would lean in and put their ear on the belly of the woman or talk to the belly of the woman who's pregnant. And they would ask the question to the fetus. And the question was, why are you here? And what gifts do you bring? And that is what the Lord told Jeremiah. Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. He was on the surface. They say I'm too young because they say he was about 14. And I'm not listening to the young boy prophesying to me. And he said, I wasn't going to prophesy no more. He said, but his word was like fire shut up in my bones. Because the what had to override the who people thought you were. If you're going to be successful as a believer, you have to live in that space. After any work you do, sing a great solo, whatever it is you do, retreat back to the what, not the who. Because if you retreat to the who, you're going to build idols to that image. You're going to start dressing like the who, acting like the who. They can't call your brother or sister. I'm prophetess. I'm elder. No, you're not. The essential thing is the what. And Peter couldn't handle it, though he had revelation. He begins to rebuke Jesus, and Jesus reveals to us what promotes the who. Satan promotes the who. He wants you to get stuck in it because he was stuck in the who. He forgot the what. And he said, I'm looking pretty good here. Got music in my body and I'm second in command. And that seat looks good over there. Befitting for who I am. Not what. And of course, we know now what happened to him. So he promotes it. That's his job. I want to admonish you to take all earthly expectations off of your call, of your purpose, of what you should look like and dress like and smell like and where you should sit in the sanctuary. And when it's your time at the mic or wherever it is you work. And say to yourself constantly, it's not the who, it's the what. It's the what. I leave that with you because that's an important lesson, because we're in a time where people do get carried away with the who of things, not the what.